I ended up getting laid off in October of 2000. The company went out of business officially the following year. If this doesn't work out, it's October, right? I'll look for a job in January. 24 years later, I still haven't gone back and gotten a real job. Once I pivoted to the bookkeeping and accounting, then I realized, okay, I think this is the path that I can grow this forever. I don't need to pivot again. There is absolutely still to this minute a gap in the market of who owns sort of the marketing position of small business accounting provider. That's what I'm kind of using as my guiding point. Managing a management layer is its even own different challenge, right? I think a lot of people struggle there. I think that's the reason a lot of businesses sort of cap out at a certain size. $1 million to $2 million in revenue is about as much as one person can manage without, working a ridiculous amount of hours. I, have no problem delegating things that I recognize that I'm neither the best at or not the best use of my time. So I hired a bookkeeper and handed that off and then continued to grow. And now we're at about, 85 people. And I had the thought one day that rather than trying to figure out which of those two would be promoted over the other, well, what if I just had them both take on the role? And that way there would be some checks and balances. To be successful in an entrepreneurial venture in the first place, you have to have a lot of optimism and a lot of persistence. We've grown every single year that we've been in business. We've been able to grow. We've hired great people. The team, is the life of the business here. If I was to quit or give up or decide, I was done growing or something, it doesn't just impact me anymore. What it has given me a greater appreciation for, and what's different, is how much more I think about other people. As an entrepreneur, I think much more about the people who have come to work for me. I take a more responsibility to heart. What can I do to help them, to pay them more, to give them more time off, to give them more opportunity? And I take that seriously. You don't mess with the culture that we've tried to establish, or that I've tried to build, but then pass on to each person that we hire and pass down through the ranks, is trying to prioritize the idea that we always want to do what's in the best interest of the client.
This is the Business Philosopher Within You podcast. I'm your host, Bhavesh Naik. If we want to build a sustainable business that can outgrow its founders, it's so important that they build an organizational culture that allows them to step into the role that they're passionate about and put in place a leadership structure for other aspects of their business. To learn from someone who has built just such a company, I've invited a very special guest to join us. Matt Remuzzi started CapForge as a consulting business in 2000 after being laid off from a venture-backed firm as part of the dot-com bust. In 2012, bookkeeping became their focus, with more accounting services added each year, including tax prep, payroll, coaching and advisory services, due diligence, and business exits. Today, Matt continues to work on growing the business, while the leadership team he has put in place runs the day-to-day operations. I am pleased to have you on this podcast, Matt.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being here.
So, Matt, 2000 and the dot-com bust. I remember those days. So, what were the exact circumstances that inspired you to start CapForge?
Well, I had always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always felt like running my own business was kind of what I was meant to do. But the challenge was always what was I going to do? I felt like there were probably a lot of things I could do, but I didn't have a plan to figure out what that was. And I didn't want to, I'd tried other things, in even back as far as, high school and college, but nothing really stuck. Nothing seemed to fit. And I still was kind of at a loss as to what to do. But when I got hired by a venture-backed firm in 2000, I was hired in May of 2000, right after I had graduated the MBA program. What I was doing at that firm was working with businesses who needed to raise capital. So we would help them write their business plans, do financial projections, and do an investor pitch deck, a presentation as to what was good about the company and why they were deserving of investor funds. Well, the
Sure.
company I was working for was itself a venture-backed company, and they just didn't perform. They didn't bring in the level of revenue that was hoped for. And I ended up getting laid off in October of 2000. The company went out of business officially the following year. But
Right.
what I thought at that point was, okay, I have some savings. And I think that there's still people who could use this service that I had been doing as an employee. I knew there were. I had some contacts. I had some opportunity to talk to people who, couldn't necessarily afford the fees that the consulting firm that I was working at wanted to charge, but I felt like
Right.
I could charge them an amount that would work for me, would be affordable for them, and I could do the work as a freelancer. And I thought, oh, if this doesn't work out, it's October, right? I'll look for a job in January. Worst
Sure.
case, right? I'll give myself a few months to try it out. So 24 years later, I still haven't gone back and gotten a real job. So it did work out,
Here
but it
you
was
are.
really by accident. I didn't have,
Yeah.
I didn't have a plan to begin that way. It just sort of fell in my lap. And I did know that I wanted to do my own thing, but the opportunity was completely by happenstance.
Yeah. The entrepreneurial spirit was there.
Yes.
But then the circumstances were kind of out of your control, and they kind of came together. And as they say in movies and book writing industry, you got the call.
Exactly.
And you picked it up. CapForge, is that the name right
That
from the
is-
beginning, or did you change that in the?
No, that was the name from the very beginning. I was actually thinking about Entry Point Ventures. That was going to be the name because I was working with people who were entering the market, starting up. And I ran it by some friends, and they said, no, that's a dumb name. You shouldn't use that.
Mhm.
I said, come up with something that doesn't mean anything and it's short, like Google or Xerox.
Right.
So I started playing with some word parts, and capforge.com was available. And I thought, okay, that's good enough. I could think about this all day, but let's just pick something and move forward. So I picked that. And for 24 years, it's been great because all the different businesses I've owned under that umbrella, the name always worked.
Yeah. Right. It's a great name. It has this feeling of strength underneath it, and it reminds you of forge is a great word in financial world, and cap can stand for many different things, of course, which is also capital, but so.
Right. If people ask me, and I later sort of backed into the idea that, it was like cap for capital and forge for
Right.
make. So it was like make money, right? But
Right. Yeah.
that really was after the fact. I made that fit the name that I had really there was a company even back then called SourceForge, and I liked the forge part. So I thought, well, what can I do with forge? But again, I spent about 20 minutes on it, and I thought I can't, spend weeks or months coming up with a name. Let's just pick something and go.
Right.
So,
No focus studies and PhDs and none of those things.
No.
Great. That's the right way to do it, I think. So one thing that I like to kind of get into a little bit is that, when people start a business, there's this idea of a vision, and there is this success literature out there that tells you different kinds of things, and you got to have vision and those kinds of things. But when I talk to entrepreneurs and business owners, business builders, I hear different stories. Some folks actually don't start with a vision. They just kind of back into it, and then they just go with it. And the vision emerges in the process. And some of them actually have a very elaborate vision. And then the rest of them, somewhere in the middle, some of them kind of pivot halfway through and all that. Did you have a vision of what you thought the company would be like, 10 years, 20 years down the road when you started it?
Not at all. I was really just, I had rent to pay, and I had a skill set, and I thought, this could work, right? I could do this, but I didn't. I guess taking a step back, like I said, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I think a lot of business owners fall into business in a different way. They're a plumber or a dentist, or they have a skill set, then they realize or sort of fall into the idea that I'm going to do this on my own as opposed to working for somebody, but they don't have any particular vision. I always had the vision of wanting to have my own business. Right. But from my side, I didn't have a particular skill set until I started this consulting.
Right.
And I didn't really know what that was going to be. And really, for the first 12 years of the 24 that I've been doing my own thing, I was moving from one thing to the other, trying different things out. I bought businesses, I sold businesses, started businesses, but I was really trying to figure out what it was that I could take and really scale to be something significant. And it took me 12 years of trying a lot of different things and sort of understanding what I was good at, what I liked, what I didn't like, where my abilities intersected with a need in the market.
Mm-hmm.
And, it definitely was not a straight line. And if you'd asked me in 2000 or 2005 or even 2010, what is CapForge going to look like? I wouldn't have had a great answer. Once I pivoted to the bookkeeping and accounting,
Mm-hmm.
then I realized, okay, I think this is the path that I can grow this forever. I don't need to
Right.
pivot again. And I do have a vision now of what it can be. But it took 12 years. So
Yeah.
it wasn't an
Sure.
overnight kind of sensation.
Yeah. And since you bring that topic up, what is the vision for your company moving forward?
So,
If you don't mind sharing.
yeah, I think there is absolutely still to this minute a gap in the market of
Mm-hmm.
who owns sort of the marketing position of small business accounting provider, right? If you think of
Right.
personal taxes, there's H&R Block and Liberty Tax. If you think of a large company accounting, there's Ernst & Young and KPMG, but there's no sort of national or well-known brand of smaller business accounting
Right.
firm that kind of owns the space. There's just 40,000 different little independent CPA offices and tax preparers and bookkeeping firms. And there's some larger regional ones, but, nobody kind of owns the space. And obviously that's an extremely ambitious,
Yeah.
goal to be. But I thought, that's what I'm kind of using as my guiding point, is to build our brand out to be
Mm-hmm.
the best known, most respected, most popular service provider for smaller businesses who need accounting. And, we've made a tiny dent. Where, we'd have to grow 10x more to be in the top 100 of accounting firms. So,
Wow.
we've got some room to grow, but
Sure.
there's still, in the time that I've been doing this, in the 12 years since I started, nobody else has moved into that space either. It's still just as
Right.
wide open as it was,
Yeah.
the day I started with one client all by myself. So I
Mm-hmm.
think, that's still the goal. Whether or not, we ever get there, I don't know. But, that is kind of what I view as the ultimate destination for the business if we could ever, achieve
Sure.
that size.
Sure. Are you thinking keeping it basically under one umbrella, your company, or are you thinking of kind of franchising or something like that? Do you have some ideas about those things, or?
Yeah, I think we probably aren't a good fit for the franchise model.
Right.
But certainly, we have figured out we serve clients in all 50 states.
Mm-hmm.
Even, just from our headquarters here in Southern California, but we have expanded our services to all 50 states. I think the next step to get there, to be more widely recognized, is to start putting offices in some of the bigger cities so that there's a physical presence beyond just the virtual presence. I think that would help spread the stamp and the brand out, much more successfully than just being virtual. As much as everyone loves
Sure.
to work virtually and we can serve clients anywhere,
Yeah.
without the footprint, without the sort of local office number and the representative in the area, I think it's much harder to be recognized as a national brand. So I think, that's a down the road idea to get there,
Yeah.
but, we're still a few years off from being ready to start opening regional offices.
Sure. You mentioned small business. Now, the U.S. definition of a small business is one employee to about 500 employees.
Right.
Is there a subset of that market you serve, or are you staying on it, or are you just keeping it broad in that market?
No, we definitely are focused on businesses past sort of the startup sole operator stage. So 500,000 in revenue up
Mm-hmm.
to 15 to 10 to 15 million in revenue.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, when you get larger than that, you at that point have in-house accounting and you don't
Right.
need, to outsource it. And, when you're a solo operator, $50,000, $100,000 a year, you have much fewer needs, right? On the accounting
Right.
side, there's just not
Sure.
much to keep
Yeah.
track of. But
Yeah.
even within the window that we've identified, there's still millions of businesses that fit that profile. So there's no shortage of clients and opportunity, but it gets to, on either end, we're just not the right fit for those businesses.
Yeah. Sure. And I think you might be able to relate to this. I work with many small businesses and mid-sized businesses, 10 employees, 20 employees to about 200, 300 employees, that range. What I've found is that this is sort of like a forgotten segment. So entrepreneurs, they get a lot of attention because it's in entrepreneurial spirit and all of that stuff. There's a ton of advice, a lot of stuff for them. And then you go into the corporate, even once your business becomes a big business, 500 employees, 1,000 employees and beyond. There's a ton of press and there's a ton of help there. But then this segment is actually forgotten. People don't even get it. When I tell people that I work with this size businesses, most people really don't kind of get the idea of what that segment is like and what their pains are, what their opportunities are, what their problems are, what their challenges are. And you have sort of like the back office view because you get all the gory details in terms of, you seeing the financials. And that is the best way to gauge the strength of a company and, all of those things. So what do you think is their biggest issue, when you look at this from the financial standpoint?
Right. Well, I think the challenge is that a lot of times it's started by a single, operator, somebody with, again, like a skill set, a plumber, an HVAC, engineer, or something. And they can do everything. They can kind of keep their hands on everything when there's 5 people, 10 people, 15 people. But then it starts to get harder. Right. And that's where it's challenging because you want to, develop a layer of management to help you run the operation, but management costs money and cuts into profit. And that is the challenge I think a lot of times they have with between delegating and being able to free up some of their time, but seeing the margins decrease and this overhead sort of admin layer come in that's not, you can't bill for it. It doesn't directly add to revenue. And so I think a lot of people, they may not even be good, particularly at managing employees directly, right? Because that's its own skill set that nobody, you don't learn it in school. Nobody really teaches you how to do it. Sometimes you've had a good mentor and you pick up some good habits. Sometimes you've had bad mentors or bad examples and you're not just, and then managing a management layer is its even own different challenge, right? Because you're not, I'm not telling Bob to go in and fix that toilet the way I showed him. I'm telling Joe to manage Bob fixing the toilet. So these are skills that I think just don't necessarily come naturally to a lot of people, and they're challenging. And there's always that conflict between I'm the owner, I have an interest from an owner's standpoint, but I also now from a management and business operations standpoint, the perspective can change, and it just it's murky waters to navigate, and there's no playbook for it. And I think a lot of people struggle there. I think it's a reason a lot of businesses sort of cap out at a certain size. $1 million to $2 million in revenue is about as much as one person can manage without working a ridiculous amount of hours. So to break through to that next level, it's as much about developing the right organization as it is about getting more customers or selling more products or services.
And also, if you can confirm for me, please, because I say this all the time, this is my perspective. When you look at someone's P&L statement, the biggest line item, without exception, almost in all cases, is the employee salary, right? Maybe number 2 is real estate. But is that true or not in your experience? Because that's our biggest expense.
It's
salaries and benefits.
Certainly is the biggest expense in service type businesses. For somebody who's, product heavy or distribution or things like that, then cost of goods sold, may be bigger, but then payroll is the second, right? Because if you think about it, it makes sense, right? You're only going to ever spend so much on electricity or phone or insurance, but as the business grows, the payroll is going to keep expanding. So that is going to be either your first or your second biggest expense in almost any business you look at.
Right. And you talked about building up this infrastructure. Now, your company itself is an example of that, where you're a founder, and yet Today, you are more the face of the company. Now, what I've seen folks do is that once they grow beyond a certain stage in the company, or the company gets to a certain stage, they step back and they either do things that they enjoy doing, but many of them just kind of step back and do other things that are not related to business. You've done something a little bit different. You've chosen to be the face of the company, and I think you built an organization that takes care of the operational side of your business. So,
Yes, correct.
yeah. So, the question I have is, did that come about basically? It just kind of just evolved, or was there more of an intention there on your part to do something like that?
It's been my intention from the beginning, really.
Right. Right.
I, had no problem delegating things that I recognize that I'm neither the best at or
Right.
not the best use of my time for the
Sure.
skills and things that I can bring. So even from the
Yeah.
very day one of starting bookkeeping, when it was just me, I
Yeah.
was doing the bookkeeping, I was finding the customers, I was doing the billing, I was doing everything. I was a
Right.
literally one man operation. The
Yeah.
very first person I hired was a bookkeeper, because I recognized that although I could do it, I wasn't the best at it, and my time
Hmm.
was better spent finding more clients as a
Yeah.
primary goal. So I hired a
Yeah.
bookkeeper and handed that off, and then continued to grow. And now we're at about,
Hmm.
85 people, and I've handed off, a lot of the admin and the payroll and the, even the hiring and interviewing and things. A lot of those things I've, brought other people in, showed them how I do it, showed them what I look for, my expectations. I tried to be as clear and provide as much guidance as I can.
Uh-huh.
And then being able to let that go was, something I was intentionally doing. I think a lot of
Right.
people, again, in my experience, entrepreneurs I've spoken with, they struggle with that. Well, that person won't be able to do
Hmm.
it as well as I can.
Yeah.
And that may be true for some things, but at the same time, the more you hold on to, the more you've capped your ability to grow. So
Yeah.
figure out how to hand it off and then accept that, yes, they may come up with different decisions or, different outcomes than you would have gotten if you'd done it yourself. But
Hmm.
as long as it's okay and it still moves the company in the direction you want, that's okay. So
Right.
I very much did it intentionally because, again, if my vision is to, become a national brand or something like,
Right.
somebody needs to focus on how that's going to happen. And there's not enough time in the day to do that and
Right.
everything else. Right. So
Yeah.
I built the everything else so I could step back and focus on how do we continue to grow successfully. And
Sure.
it was very much an intention. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. I love that. Something that you've done that I don't see a lot of businesses do is that you have two CEOs in the company. And again, it's the same question: was that intentional, or did that just kind of come about? And I really am really curious about how that works, because it's extremely exceptional. I think the only in the public forum that I can think of a company was BlackBerry. They had two CEOs at one point, and I think there are a few, but now they have CEO and COO, and CEO and president, and all those things, but not two CEOs. So tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah. So it wasn't the original idea, but
Yeah.
what I had seen in my business and in some other businesses was it's very difficult to find somebody who has the broad range of skills, who can look at
Yeah.
operations, who can look at admin, who can look at marketing and make successful decisions across those things. And also not fall into the idea of, well, now I have this role. I'm sort of the top of the pyramid here.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't like something, I'm going to give it less attention or, demote it. If there's something I personally think is more important, I'm going to raise it up and give it more credibility. And that may or may not, be influenced by the people who are in those departments, personal
Yeah.
dynamics, other things, right? It's just, we're human nature. It's
Of
sometimes
course.
hard to
Yeah. Yeah.
avoid that. So, and I had seen that in the past with some of the people I had, promoted to take on more responsibilities. They
Mm-hmm.
could do a good job in some ways, but then create friction and,
Mm-hmm.
personal dynamic issues in other ways.
Sure. Right.
And as I was still, working towards how are we going to kind of build this up, I had to outstanding employees from two totally separate. One was very strong on the accounting side and the other was very strong on the admin side. And they really didn't overlap. And to be honest, they hardly, knew each other. Never mind, were particularly friendly. And just the way the organization worked, they just didn't have much opportunity to interact.
Yeah.
And I had the thought one day that rather than trying to figure out which of those two would be promoted over the other, well, what if I just had them both take on the role? And that way there would be some checks and balances. Suppose the accounting person had an issue with somebody in the accounting department or outside the accounting department. But before saying, well, I think we need to let this person go or do whatever, let me check with the other person who doesn't have any particular vested interest in it. Am I being, too harsh? Am I jumping to conclusions? Am I letting personal feelings? And so they could sort of check and balance and same, going the other direction.
Yeah.
And on any big company decision, let's just make sure we're both on the same page and we both agree that this, whatever the decision is, it moves the company forward in the right direction.
All right.
And then my role becomes, if there's a, split decision, then I get to be the tiebreaker.
Right.
But what tells me that this is working out pretty well is that there's very infrequently a case where they both strongly have, differing opinions and feel like we really need somebody we need Matt to come in and say, what he, and when that happens, because in the early days, right, they were both new to the role. And so I would always say, here's what I think, but here's why I think it. Here's what I was using to kind of make the decision that I came to. So the next time when you're coming to a decision point, you've got not only my decision on the previous one, but also here's the criteria and how I weighed them. Yeah. And it's worked out fantastically well. I know it's, atypical. Yeah. But from my standpoint, it's worked out really well. And I think it's also worked out very well for the organization because some people might have a better relationship or, just a relationship with one or the other, and they have somebody to go to. But if for some reason that relationship is not as strong or as positive as they want, they have an alternative person they can also talk to.
Right.
Who has no, preconceived ideas about what should or shouldn't happen or anything.
Exactly.
And it's worked out, really well. They are what I consider the best mix of partners, which is they have their own areas of influence, right? So they're not duplicating the work, but they understand each other's role and responsibilities. They're both aiming for the same goal. They're both incentivized by having the same outcome. So, it's a great partnership. If either one left, the other one would have a much harder job to do. So they both appreciate each other. They both, have the same compensation. So there's no sort of competitiveness there that as the business grows, they both, increase the compensation. So it's been, almost 3 years now. And I feel like I'm super lucky that this all worked out. It's been great.
Yeah, that's great. For the benefit of our listeners, this comes up quite a bit, conflict or potential conflict in employee management. These are all really difficult issues for most business owners to deal with. So if you would, could you kind of walk us through the time and would kind of give us an example? You don't have to, tell all the details that you may not want to share, but the time when there was a conflict and something happened where you had to get involved and resolve it. It's kind of some example of, what are the types of things that you had to get involved into and how you resolve it?
Well, I mean, we've had some cases where, a particular employee has run into some issues and one of the two co-CEOs might have a closer working relationship with that employee and become more frustrated, more disappointed, more wanting to seek out, maybe we should put together an improvement plan with the idea that if certain milestones aren't hit in short order, that we would need to make a change on this person. And it's so, but there's been one person says, well, yeah, but overall the work is still good and that things are positive. And the other person is sort of saying it's just not acceptable. And I don't think we need to, we should continue. And so those are situations where they've kind of needed a tiebreaker. And I try to, look at both sides and see if, okay, if I didn't have either, if I was just the CEO and that was it, right? What would
Yeah,
I do?
yeah,
What would
yeah,
be my
yeah.
take on it? And
Right.
then, kind of spell out again, here's what I think, you know, yes, most of the work has been good, but the things that have been problematic are significantly problematic.
Yeah.
So while I don't think it's cause for immediate action, what I do think we need to do is spell this out, maybe enhance the job description, maybe go over a specific sort of improvement plan, maybe with
Yeah.
less harsh consequences than one of them wanted, but not, leaving it out altogether, and
Right.
trying to, reach a middle ground where we can hopefully guide this employee back to the level of performance that we want, and
Hmm.
make sure they understand that, there is a finite amount of time to do it, but maybe not quite as short and as sort of harsh as
Sure.
as the
Yeah.
original proposal was,
Sure. Sure.
and see
Sure.
if we can find, a way to make this work for everybody.
Yeah. And there's a positive side to this, which is that, it comes up and then it becomes a template. I think you said that it becomes a criteria for sort of like a roadmap for the future similar conversations and similar issues that arise. And, that becomes a part of your intellectual property, your management intelligence, basically, as a company.
Yes.
So that's also a great thing to do. You built a very successful company. It looks like you're going to build even a bigger company. So you're on your way to bigger success. And you already are successful and on your way to bigger success. And yet, when people are looking from the outside in, often entrepreneurship looks like a glamorous thing, right? And for the people who are looking from the inside out, it's not always that, right? It's not always moonlight and roses. So has there ever been a time when you thought that it was probably like Dark Night of the Soul type of a moment, or something similar, where you thought that, my God, this was a bad decision. I shouldn't have done that. What was that doing starting a business? This whole thing. Just want to throw it all away and walk away from it. Has that ever happened to you?
I mean, about once a week.
I love that. Yeah.
truly thinking that, I'm just not on the right path anymore, and I would be better
Yeah.
off to sell it or walk away or what have you.
Right.
That's relatively rare.
Yeah.
I think to be entrepreneurial, to be successful in an entrepreneurial venture in the first place, you have to have a lot of optimism and a lot of persistence, right? And so it would take a lot for you to say, boy, this just isn't worth it anymore. This is just too much work. And of course, with time, right, you become less and less likely to say, this isn't going to work, right? 24 years in, I've got 24 years of track record that tells me this is working, right?
Exactly.
But
Right.
a year in, 6 months in, even a few years in, you might hit a point where you just say, boy, this is a lot of work and I just don't know if it's worth it. And I remember in the, some of the early days, back when, it was only 2012, but I used to meet clients for sales calls predominantly in person. And, that was always a headache. And sometimes you in the early days, right, you want to get every customer you can because cash is king. You've got bills to pay. You're trying to grow. So anybody that says, I'm interested, okay, great, let's meet. But, it was maybe the third or fourth time on a Friday afternoon that somebody said, I want to meet. Let's meet at this Starbucks. And it would be 45 minutes from my house, normally an hour and a half in Friday rush hour traffic. And you get all the way down there and then they don't show up. And you just think, oh, boy, I could have been with my family. I could have stayed home.
Exactly.
I could have read a book at the beach, right? Why I'm sitting in traffic for an hour and a half to get to a meeting that somebody flakes on me. And then you get all the way back and they go, oh, sorry, can we meet Monday instead?
No apologies, right?
No apologies. Just, let's change the schedule. Well,
Right.
So, there are certainly times where you feel like, boy, this is a lot of frustration. And, I remember specifically heading back from one meeting with a current client that was just a disaster. This was somebody who didn't understand accounting at all, but wanted to yell at me over and over for, this number doesn't make sense and that can't be right. And this isn't how it works. And, in the meantime, it'd be like me telling a brain surgeon they screwed up. Like, what do I know about brain surgery? Right. But he's going to yell at me because he doesn't like the way his numbers look.
Yeah.
And so I'm driving home and I stopped at a light and I look across and there's a guy at a strip mall and he's just mowing the lawn. And I thought, maybe like what's the worst thing that happened to that guy's there, right? The lawnmower runs out of gas. Like, okay.
Yeah. I want to be that. I want to be that
guy. I want to just be pushing a mower outside, beautiful sunshine day. Yeah. Nobody's yelling at him. Nothing's going wrong. But of course, he's got headaches too, right? His back probably hurts and it's, there's a million things going on. So there's certainly times that you get frustrated and you get disappointed and you question whether or not things are going right. But I think certainly for me, at least, there's no world in which I can imagine going and working for somebody else at this point or doing, just taking a regular corporate job. It just wouldn't fit me. And I knew that from very early on, very early in life that I was meant to be, doing my own thing. And that's where I would be happiest. And that has certainly come to be true. It just took me a while to finally get to that point where I could do it. But yes, there's no business owner alive today that would tell you that every day has been great. Nobody's ever, had any problems. Nobody's ever had second thoughts about it. That just comes with the territory.
Sure. And what keeps you going? So when you hit moments like this, what is it that helps you get back in the game?
Well, I try to think about, the positive things that we've done. We've grown. Every single year that we've been in business, we've been able to grow. We've hired great people. The team, is the life of the business here. So, if I was to quit or give up or decide, I was done growing or something, it doesn't just impact me anymore. Even if I say I'm okay with it, it impacts our clients. It impacts our employees. They no longer have opportunity to continue to grow in the firm if the firm isn't growing, right? We can no longer provide more and better services if we stop kind of trying. So I try to focus on the bigger picture and look at the wins and figure as long as the wins column outweighs the losses column, it's worth it to keep going, right?
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. One thing that I kind of like to ask folks is that entrepreneurship sometimes changes people. And, you've been at this for a very long time. And it's probably a hard question for you to ask because you haven't done other things that corporate people do, right? They start a business, stop the business and do corporate gig and then start the business. But in your case, do you think that entrepreneurship has changed you as a person? Are you the same person that you were when you started the business?
I think, as you are
now.
I think what it has given me a greater appreciation for and what's different is how much more I think about other people. So, and I think part of that's just age too, and getting married and having kids is all part of that evolution. It's a little hard to separate from being an entrepreneur, but I think when you're an employee, and I was an employee, I had many jobs before I, was out on my own. You're kind of thinking about yourself, right? How do I get a bigger paycheck? What do I need to get done today so I don't get in trouble? What, is my role? But you're not thinking too much about how do I help my boss or how do I help the people I'm managing? You're kind of just, this is my role and these are the things I need to do. As an entrepreneur, I think much more about the people who have come to work for me. I take a more responsibility to heart. What can I do to help them, to pay them more, to give them more time off, to give them more opportunity? And I take that seriously. Like I said, if I was to say, I'm done, I'm going to walk away, I'm going to sell to whoever, the first person to write me a reasonable sized check, I'm going to walk away, I would be very concerned. What are they going to do? How are they going to treat my people? How are they going to, move forward from here? Is it what I would be doing, or are they going to be? So I think I've got a much more of an appreciation for how important everyone who is here is in the role of our growth. And so I want to make sure that they're I could do the best for them that I can.
Sure.
And, that we really are thinking about a bigger picture than just, what it means for me. How much money can I make? How much can I keep? How much can I grow the business so it's worth more to me? I really take a much more global view of the whole business and all the people in it. So I think that's something that, is an evolution. And I get part of it. I think as you get older, you have more of you're a little less selfish. You have a little more appreciation for the world around you. But absolutely being a business owner, I think if I was in a corporate role, I probably wouldn't. I'd still be mostly focused on what does it mean for me and my promotions and my, because I just wouldn't have the ability to impact other people nearly as much as I do owning the business.
Sure. Absolutely. And on that point, one of the things that we kind of get into a lot on this podcast is about legacy. And, how do we build a company that outlives us? How do I leave behind something that is beyond me? And you're right on cue on that, because that's an important thing. It is an intangible thing, but I like to bet that is part of what keeps us going. That's part of what makes us human in a way. And so if you know whether or not you exit the company or sell it or grow it and make it huge, any of those things, is there something that you built here in this company that you're so proud of, that even if someone takes over, you want to sit down with them and say, hey, okay, fine, thank you for the check. But here's one thing you don't mess with. What would that be?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I think the answer, the right answer is you don't mess with the culture. And obviously that's an immediately very difficult thing to say, how do you not mess with it? But the culture that we've tried to establish, or that I've tried to build, but then pass on to each person that we hire and pass down through the ranks, is trying to prioritize the idea that we always want to do what's in the best interest of the client.
Sure.
And hopefully that aligns with what's in the best interest of us and the employee doing the work and so on.
Yeah.
But if there is a misalignment, which sometimes happens, we want to try to do always what's in the best interest of the client. So, and that can be bigger picture stuff, but it even can come down to, the client calls us at 4:00 with a concern. I guess I could get back to them tomorrow. We'd still be within our normal 24-hour service window, but I can tell from the client's message, they're concerned, they're upset. This is stressing them out. So if I can give them a call back today, even though I was about to be done for the day, and help put their mind at ease and do that, then that's what I want to try and do. And that's not just me doing that as the owner because I have a financial incentive, but that's me doing it because that's the kind of service that we want to provide. That's what makes clients like us and want to refer us to other people and stick with us. And it just makes me feel like we're living up to the promise that we made them when we brought them on board in the first place, which was we would take care of them. Yeah. So that's the part that you don't want to mess with, right? You can, change the software we use. You can update procedures as things evolve. You can add different lines of service we might not currently have, but don't mess with the culture. That is really the secret sauce, which is no secret at all, as to how we've gotten to the size we have and how we would continue, I think, to grow. And if you, put policies in place or just change the vibe for whatever that means of how the company is run and how the management treats the employees and how the ownership treats the management, to sort of devalue that core principle, then I think you're going to see down the road, it won't happen overnight, but down the road, you're going to see negative impacts from that change.
Sure. Wise words. If someone is working on Wall Street and working in a venture capital firm and they want to start a business, what's one word of advice or a few words of advice that you would have for this person?
I would say you're going to be the most likely to be successful if you can find something that aligns with what you like and what you can do well. right?
Right.
And what I see from a lot of people is they try to pick businesses that they think will pay well, or that
Mm-hmm.
have, certain characteristics. They're looking for
Right.
recurring revenue or a large market or
Right.
growth. It's a trending thing,
Yeah.
right? But they don't have any real interest in it. They're just
Yeah.
looking at it strictly from a financial standpoint. And I think that's likely to backfire most of the time, because if you don't have
Yeah.
any interest, when you hit those, bad days and dark days and big problems, you're likely to say, "Oh, I don't even like this, and it's not making me the
Yeah.
money I thought, so I'm going to quit." If you like what you do and you're also good at it, then you're going to be able to get through those hard times, because you know that you enjoy it more than you don't enjoy it, right? There's more
Sure.
good than
Yeah.
bad, and you're going to be able to power through those things. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think there really needs to be an alignment. It doesn't, sometimes though people get confused, right? Like, suppose I like to play golf, right?
Right.
But that doesn't mean go start a golf business, because chances are in a golf business, you're going to be spending very little time playing golf, right? You're going to be doing
Right.
other things, running a retail operation, or,
Yeah.
whatever form you get into it. You're going to be sort of adjacently involved in the hobby you like, but what you like is being out on the course playing, right?
Yeah.
So
Right. Yeah.
unless you're a professional golfer, chances are
Yeah.
you're not going to get to spend much time doing that. So it doesn't mean
Yeah.
start a business that relates to a hobby that you currently enjoy.
Right.
I don't do accounting on the weekends or anything. Right? That's not my,
Not a fetish.
right. But I enjoy talking to other business owners about their financials and the numbers
Sure.
and how things they do impact their
Yeah.
top line and their bottom line. That I really enjoy. And so this is a good fit for me. And I, good at it enough to be able to grow the business. So I think that would be my advice, is find something that aligns in that way, rather than just focusing on, and I guess the other side too, right? Just something you're passionate about. You're really passionate about golf, but it can be really hard to make a living, right? Opening a golf
Yes.
shop or something,
Right.
that could be very
Yeah. You have to
challenging
mash.
business. That might not be a
Right.
good fit for you. And it doesn't satisfy the desire to just do the hobby. So
Right.
think about what you're getting into from that standpoint, rather than
Right.
jumping into something that either looks like it could make a lot of money or happens to be a hobby that you enjoy on the weekends.
Sure. Absolutely. Sure. My rule of thumb is that if I have a bad headache, I have a bad cold, I have flu symptoms, my whole body aches. If I'm in that situation, what's one thing that I would do in work related things where I would still do it? And when I'm engaged in that activity, I forget that I have a headache. I forget that I have a cold, and I forget that my whole body is aching, right? And make a list of those activities. For example, me doing this podcast it's 100% in that category right now. And, this conversation that we're having, I've had conversations like this when I had a really bad back pain, right? And I would show up and do my thing and then go back in my bed. But that's one thing that I really like to do. So it's a funny thing that we're hardwired to do certain things better than others, and there's some mischievous component to that I don't know what it is. But once we know what that is, find an opportunity, or create your schedule and your work environment where you basically give yourself a chance to do that more than other things. And other things are not going to go away. You still have to do those, but do more of these than those other things. So wise advice, I think. Thank you. You're in California, but you're not from California. Is that correct?
I was born in New York.
Okay.
And then when I was still a kid, we moved to Los Angeles area, north of Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And then I moved down to San Diego to go to college, and I just never left, because San Diego is really hard to beat.
Yeah. I've been to San Diego. I love that town. Yeah. Yeah. I love the vibe. It's nice, laid back vibe.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And you went to college there. So you went to University of San Diego, right?
University of California, San Diego is part of the UC system, same as Berkeley and UCLA. UCSD is one of the colleges in the UC system. So I went there for undergrad. I took psychology because at the time I went, they didn't actually have a business major. They were much more of science-focused school. So I took psychology. I really liked the campus. I liked the idea of going to UCSD. I didn't, I knew I eventually wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't know what it was, what I was going to do. So I took psychology because I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
And then I later went back to San Diego State University and got my MBA. And they had, I specifically went there, not just because it's in San Diego also, but they had an entrepreneurship specific track. And I thought, if I go and get an MBA and I focus on entrepreneurship, then by the time I come out, right, I have no excuses left. I've got to be able to be an entrepreneur then.
Yeah. But I'll tell you one thing. Probably, and this is the reach on my part, and I'll probably make some people upset, especially people who are academics and they're professors and run universities. But I have a feeling that your psychology major helped you more than your business major. Any thoughts on that?
That is true. I think understanding people is the key to any business, because even if you're a solo business, right, you still have vendors and you still have customers. You're going to be interacting with people. And of course, if you grow, you're then going to have employees, which is a whole other, level of interacting with people. And it's, if you can do that well, the other skills, honestly, I mean, I could do what I do now if I just had a high school diploma, as far as certifications and everything I've learned has been on the job learning for the most part. But dealing with people, you can immediately see business owners who are not good at dealing with people. They only tend to have a few employees. They tend to have a lot of turnover. So sometimes it's family that works for them because no one else can stand them. That's, and
even family probably can't stand them.
We can't stand them either, but can't leave. But people who have much larger, more successful organizations have figured out generally how to deal better with people and how to motivate them and how to get them, all kind of working in the same direction. Now, of course, there's plenty of examples. We hear stories about, toxic workplaces and things all the time, and bad actors as managers and owners. But I think by and large, the people who have done well and figured it out are good at managing and working with people. And, that's just, again, not a skill set that they teach you almost anywhere. It's just not, managing people is not something that most people get any training in.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you do for fun, Matt?
I do a few things. I've recently been working on, I got my private pilot's license. So I've been working on adding to that, adding an instrument rating to that. But also I enjoy surfing, and then I also really enjoy doing hiking and getting out, just in nature, doing day-long hikes and week-long hiking trips and so on. So I like to be outdoors a lot. And then, flying has been a lot of fun too.
Sure. Your family comes along with you?
Yes, family comes with me.
Thank you so much, Matt, for this conversation. Any last words that you want to share with our audience?
No, I mean, I think it's been a great conversation. I think we've covered a lot of good ground. I think the reality is that despite, I guess, all these people, that want to sell you the secret to business success and the secret to this and their blueprint formula and everything, the reality is most of it's pretty straightforward and simple, right? Yeah. Treat people well, treat your customers well, treat your employees well, do a really good job on whatever you've offered to do. And, you will find the success. And anywhere you try to cut corners and shortcut and be less than transparent, less than honest, less than full integrity, that's where you run into trouble. There's not, I don't think there's really business secrets. It's just do a really good job and treat people well. And, I think you will prevail. Yes, there'll be some rough days. Yes, there'll be some, some roadblocks and hurdles, but if you keep going, I think, it's a simple philosophy of that, doing a good job and treating people well that works.
Thank you again, Matt, for sharing your story. And I feel honored that you shared this story with me.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. You have a good balance of, adding your own feedback, your own perspective and your own thoughts on things. But, having it be a two-way conversation, I felt like it was balanced. And again, you just have a very pleasant and engaging kind of conversational manner. It doesn't feel overbearing. It doesn't feel shy and reticent. It's just a good balance between, the two of us making various points about things. So I really enjoyed it.